Hi, Lindsay. Thanks a lot for having us into your home. After reading a little bit about your story, it sounds like you got quite a raw deal.
Yes, I do.
But before we get into the details, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into your story.
I'm a professional singer and actor, and I'm also a music teacher and director.
How long have you been doing that?
Ever since right out of high school. So I'm 26 now, so it's been a while.
So it's been a little while.
Yeah.
You getting pretty good at it?
I think so. Haven't had any complaints yet, thankfully.
And you're still doing that today?
Yes, I am.
All right. So you submitted this story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, in May 2003, I was involved in a very serious car accident that left me very severely injured for the rest of my life, and it was under very unfair circumstances, and I was hit by a drunk driver in a police chase. Tell
us about the accident.
Well, it was about 2:30 in the morning, very, dark and lonely outside. I was on my way to a friend's house. I happened to see two state troopers chasing a car that went past me, and they forked off in another direction onto another highway. So I didn't think much about it. And a couple minutes later, before I know it, I'm awake and on the ground, and this accident had happened.
So you got hit by a suspect that they were chasing.
Exactly.
And you learned that after the accident because while you were unconscious?
Yes, basically I had to piece everything together because people really weren't telling me the full story. All I knew was that I was hurt, I was rushed to the hospital, I had no clue what was going on, and I was in and out of consciousness. So I found out kind of the details later that two state troopers were chasing this driver that they initially suspected of speeding, and then they realized that he was drunk and continued to chase him against their chase policy and chased him into another jurisdiction. And when they chased him past me, they kind of made like a U-turn and came back around. And as I was going through the green light at an intersection, they came back around and hit me from the side. And the driver didn't have his headlights on, and the police did not have their lights or sirens on. So I had no clue that they were coming.
So the suspect's car hit your car, it flipped over once, twice?
I don't know how many times, but at least once. And the car was completely almost flattened. It looked like it had been in an impound lot, basically.
So you didn't see this coming at all?
At all, because none of the cars had their lights on.
So can you give us more details about the accident, of what you remember or what they told you?
Well, I remember waking up from being unconscious. I was on the ground, and I basically looked up and saw this man standing above me. He was screaming, like, "We need to help this girl. She's dead. She's dead." He didn't realize that I was actually alive, because that's the really bad condition that I was in. I couldn't move. And, basically my whole left arm was completely shredded to pieces, had like no skin on it. I ended up having to implant a plate and 6 pins in my arm, my right arm. And I have 2 pins in my ankle, and I basically was laying on the ground, just stuck. I could not move because I had broken my back in 4 places as well. And I dislocated my jaw, elbow, shoulder, everything. So I was stuck there on the ground, and the car that hit me ended up catching on fire while I was on the ground, and was...
It caught on fire?
Yes, it caught on fire. And I could see it in my peripheral vision, but I couldn't move. And this car was on fire, and explosions were happening, and I was still laying there with no medical attention or anything.
You must have thought this was the end of the world. This is it for you.
I seriously thought if there was any way of surviving this, just injuries alone, it's maybe possible since I'm awake and conscious now, but now I'm gonna burn to death because just shards of glass were flying and there were explosions, and it was really scary.
Cars were blowing up all around you. Oh, yes. My goodness. What happened to the suspect?
Well, the suspect had a broken leg. He tried to run. The state troopers chased him instead of administering medical care. After the trial, he was put in jail.
Instead of administering medical care to you?
Yes.
It was pretty obvious you were significantly hurt, unconscious, but they chose to chase the suspect with just a broken leg.
And one of the state troopers on the trial actually admitted to seeing me upside down and entangled in my car and screaming for help, apparently. I don't remember this, but he testified that he saw me in the car and I was trapped inside of it, and he instead chose to go with the other state trooper to chase the suspect with a broken leg.
So, okay, the suspect had a broken leg. The driver of the car had a broken leg.
Yes.
You mentioned other passengers in the suspect's car. What happened to them?
Well, unfortunately, one of them was killed. It was an 18-year-old boy, and the other passenger was a 19-year-old girl who ended up having, some bad injuries. They were all under the influence of drugs and alcohol at the time of the accident.
So you went through a few lawyers. You ended up going through trial. Can you tell us about how the trial went down?
The trial lasted years, I think about 3 years, if I'm remembering correctly. I was dropped by multiple lawyers because they knew that the case was just, I couldn't defeat the state of Florida, and that's who I was suing. So they didn't really see any point behind it, but I ended up with a wonderful, very compassionate lawyer who helped me a lot.
You mentioned that you felt bad for this 18-year-old and the other suspects in the car, but what about you? I mean, did they show some horrific pictures of your injuries and stuff? You had to relive that, I'm sure, even though you're dealing with the daily pain.
Yes, I mean, in the trial, it was amazing to see that I was still walking. I mean, the accident report lists my injuries as incapacitating. They really didn't have much faith in how I was going to recover from it. I didn't have much faith in how I was going to recover from it because, I couldn't walk at all, and then I was walking with a walker at 19 years old. So basically I have a spinal injury that will affect me for the rest of my life. Technically it's a handicap, but I try not to really look at it that way. But it's hard not to when my everyday life is affected,
So do you think you guys actually won this trial because the other trooper came forward and he admitted to his guilt in this?
Actually, he didn't really come forward with anything. My family and I dug very, very deep into the investigation of this and basically pieced together the puzzle ourselves, which is sad. But and then when it was brought to the attention of the chief of police that I was pursuing it legally, that's when the story started unfolding from their end. And eventually I didn't hear from the state troopers until the actual trial itself, and they were very tight-lipped about it. And it was, enough. That was enough for me.
Lindsay, thank you so much for telling us your story.
Thank you.
We hope you win the $1,000.
Thank you. That's my raw deal.